it's Kelly Timecat. Welcome to vlog 14, February 2023. The end of January and February so far has been a fairly difficult and stressful time, especially the last week. But I'm hoping things will settle down. Lots of difficult things happening all around the world. There's been a state of emergency in Chile that I'm not sure has made the news much. There's been over 40 wildfires and a prolonged heat wave. And they've been in drought since 2010. In New Zealand, Cyclone Gabrielle caused widespread damage. In Ohio, in the USA, a train carrying vinyl chloride derailed. That earthquake in southern Turkey and northern Syria, with a magnitude of 7.8, is responsible for 50,000 deaths. And now we're coming up to the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine. In Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon stepped down. Now there's a contest for her replacement. On the entertainment side, the Brit Awards took place. I was really pleased when Wet Leg won Best Group of the Year and Best New Artist. Becky Hill won Best Dance. I thought there were some really good results. I like a lot of contemporary music from the charts. I do a lot of treadmilling, and there's quite a few songs that I hear time and time again I really get to like. I suppose probably because I listen to the lyrics and I sort of get some of the emotional impact of them. I really liked Taylor Swift's song from late last year, the brilliant Ray, with escapism, interesting, heartfelt stuff, largely about not feeling, trying not to feel. Really interesting songs in the current charts, and a lot of people my age just go, oh no, I prefer the music of the 70s, 80s, 90s. Sure, I like a lot of music from the past. I may get onto that in further blogs, but I like a lot of current music as well. Like a lot of the Welsh tunes I listen to, Welsh language songs. Tamla. One genre of music I like a lot is rave music from the early 90s, and Tamla seems to hark back to that era. It appeals a lot. It's award season and the British Academy Film Awards took place. A few wins that I very much agreed with. Congratulations to Austin Butler for his stunning performance in Elvis. Best Actor, Cate Blanchett won Best Actress. She was excellent in Tar, which I recently mentioned. I watched. I'm looking forward to seeing All Quiet on the Western Front at some point. The Banshees of Inisherin. I did not like this much at all. It's very depressing and rather long. The dialogue felt humdrum. The setting is an island off the coast of Ireland 100 years ago in 1923. The Irish Civil War is underway on the other side of the water, and you can see bombs exploding, and some of the key characters are unaware of what it's about. I suppose the aspect of it that I did get was some people are more insular, don't feel confident enough in exploring. That was the message I got from it. The thing I least liked about it was the self-harm scenes. It's in the trailer, Brendan Gleeson's character who gradually cuts off more fingers from his hand so that he can't play anymore. Didn't really get it, I suppose. Perhaps it went over my head. A little girl who lives down the lane, Jodie Foster, plays a teenager, Ren, who has moved into a new home with her father. Local townsfolk are curious, especially as they never get to meet her dad, and whenever they knock on the door, Rin explains that he's working and not to be disturbed, or he's on a business trip. She has to deal with some very unsavoury characters, in particular Frank Hallett, played by Michael Sheen, who, when discovering she's celebrating her birthday alone on the eve of Halloween, makes advances towards her. Then there's his mother, Cora, played by Alexis Smith, a well-connected and powerful local dignitary who treats Rin's allegations about her son with contempt. There's a local sheriff. There's also Mario Podesta, played by Scott Jacoby, the nephew of the police officer, and a magician. And when he appears in the scene, I thought, oh, but he may have been the most benevolent of the people Rin encounters. I've read a little bit about the film, and I get the impression that it led to campaigns that improved the rights of children. So I think it was a good film. It's very of the 70s. It felt of its time in mid-70s. It shows the sort of threats that a teenage girl would face, and still face, but hopefully laws are at least aligned to stop some of the problems. Shotgun Wedding is a newly released film on Amazon Prime. I'd seen it advertised on posters and I thought I'd give it a go, but I soon realised that I'm not fond of the whole idea, as there's this well-to-do couple having their wedding on an island in the Philippines, and the wedding guests get attacked by an armed group of mercenaries out to hold them ransom. The guests have to use their wits to fight off this criminal gang. I don't know, maybe I was just not in the mood for it, but isn't there enough terror in the real world? This didn't feel like the escapism I wanted, certainly on the day I watched it. I suppose sometimes I get it first for on-screen aggression or love, kiss kiss bang bang, but I just didn't feel like it. Fablemans, I've reviewed that, that's great. Extraordinary, started seeing a few series and I don't tend to find the time, so I've only seen one. I heard the adverts on the radio and I thought I'd give it a go, and so far it was interesting. That first half episode, everyone apparently gets a superpower in this fictional world. The main character, Jen, hasn't. She's about 25 and she's still waiting for a superpower. It's got good humour, I thought. I also, in terms of series, I saw Harry and Meghan. I started watching this with a friend just before Christmas. I think she was more unimpressed with Harry and Meghan than I were when we started, and we planned to watch just 6-minute segments at a time. That would have taken ages, so after Christmas we ramped it up and saw full episodes each week. We were worried that it would start becoming available as episode 1 had vanished. I've listened to lots of James O'Brien and Natasha Devon on the LBC covering how badly the press have treated the couple. I've had more sympathy than, say, my friend did, but I thought this was really helpful, giving more detail, giving more examples of exactly how difficult their life was, and how some close friends, people who became close friends like Tyler Perry, came in and how in the early days of the pandemic when they fled from Canada to California. And there's also a lot of interesting commentary from David Olusoga and Afwas Hirsch, both of whom I have a lot of time for. Seen The Whale, as you know, hopefully you can see my review of that. That was a great film. Black Bear, I like Aubrey Plaza, having seen her in Ingrid Goes West 2017, which I loved. This film, I found afterwards, was inspired by the dreams of Lawrence Michael Levine, the writer and director, and that helps it make a little bit more sense. It's split into 2 parts, and I found it difficult to reconcile them as they are totally different stories. I've seen quite a few films based on the filmmaking process, and the second half of this does that, but as far as I could tell, the characters are doing different things and forming different relationships from the first half. However, I suppose Aubrey Plaza's Alison is a headstrong and to some extent unpopular young woman in both segments, and she's certainly a really good actress. She's still up there on my list of favourites. Sleeping with the Enemy, this was another choice for my 20th century film. It's got a heavy theme. Julia Roberts stars as Sarah, a woman who finds an opportunity to fake her own death and flee her violent husband, Martin Patrick Bergin. She's understandably cautious when she meets Ben, Kevin Anderson, a potential new love interest. It shows how difficult it can be to escape from the horrifically monstrous abuser despite careful planning and drastic measures. When Martin becomes suspicious that things aren't how they seem, he figures out how to find out more clues and follows the trail of breadcrumbs. I had mixed feelings about the ending, and it left me in a pensive mood. Why can't people leave others alone? Unfortunately, the world is really messed up. Blue Jean 2022. I really like this film, set in the late 80s, when schoolteacher Jean, played by Rosie McEwen, faces a major dilemma when Section 28 of the Local Government Act is brought into law. In essence, the law makes it illegal for teachers to promote LGBT relationships. They are, in fact, described as pretend family relationships, such an insult. It's just, things have changed enormously since those days, and it's a really salient reminder that whilst we've got a long way to go, things have got better. It was really a fascinating story. Somebody I used to know. This, I think, is the first film with 2023 shown against it. It's directed by Dave Franco, and it's a romantic comedy about a hard-working television producer, Alison, who gets laid off and heads back home to regroup. She meets an old flame, Sean, and when she seems to hit it off on a night out, she gets it into her head that Sean is meant for her. The trouble is, he's going out with Cassidy, and as with most love triangles, someone is going to end up heartbroken. Cassidy, I thought, was lovely, and as far as I could see, it feels like Alison really is in the wrong. She's the baddie, and so I was rooting for Cassidy. I thought it thought-provoking. That's quite unusual for rom-coms, but I kind of liked how matters resolved, the way Alison behaved. It was almost cringy. It was just so bad, and yet, if only she realised. Another 20th century film I saw was Female Perversions, 1993, I think. I didn't like the title, but I decided it was surely ironic, and it stars Tilda Swinton as a lawyer called Eve. Tilda is excellent. The story I had mixed feelings about. It's an observation of the treatment of women and aspects of femininity which feel accentuated and exaggerated, almost camp, I guess, in some respects. There's some LGBT relationships, quite interesting from the point of view of showing bisexuality. She has to travel to a small town in California, Fillmore, from LA to represent her sister who's been caught shoplifting. An interesting character was Edwina, or Ed, whose aunt keeps trying to persuade her to be more womanly. She's struggling. There's some self-harm and suicidal scenes. I think it helps show how things were in the mid-90s, which were better than the 70s and 80s, but not perhaps as far ahead as we are now on LGBT matters. We've still got some way to go, of course. That's one interesting thing about seeing films from the past, observing how things change over time. And, of course, not necessarily linear. Sometimes things seem to go backwards a bit. Hopefully not too much. Women Talking, 2022. This is set in 2010, but it feels like it's much further back in history, as the characters are part of a Mennonite community who appear to eschew modern technology. As the title suggests, the story focuses on the women, many of whom have been raped or sexually assaulted by their menfolk, and it leads to a huge outburst of anger, and the male population flee to town to seek refuge in safety of a prison. It's full of passion and emotion, and it's got astounding acting. I gather it's based on a true story where many women woke up to find clear evidence they'd been subjected to sexual violation, but then found their religion as well as other factors provided obstacles. There's the denial, there's sustained gaslighting, some really horrific stuff, and dealing with this sensitively in a film, I thought it was done really well. Some bruising shown, but most of the acts of violence aren't shown. It's just the element of threat. And after discounting the women who voted along the do-nothing lines, the story focuses on how the others resolve the matters between them. Avatar, The Way of the Water. I really love this. Special effects. I saw the first Avatar 13 years ago, and it's such a wondrous place, and it really is escapism. Eclipses as common as sunsets, and there's battles, there's the sky people, the baddies who are actually humans, whilst I suppose it's almost like Star Trek. There's elements that show a parallel with racism and with how people can get along. People don't always get along. Sometimes you have to fight people. I think that's my takeaway from the film, and really enjoyed it as much as the first film. What a Girl Wants, 2003, starring Amanda Bynes playing Daphne, a 17-year-old American who's the daughter daughter of a Brit, Colin Firth's aristocrat, and her mum from America, who has left, perhaps been forced out. She's been shown a letter before Daphne was born, and she returned back to America. When Daphne's 17 years old, and she's heard a lot about her dad but never met him, and she flies to London to find him. She does lots of sightseeing, and then she notices Henry Dashwood on the news as he's given up his place in the House of Lords and he's campaigning to be an MP. The reverse of what happens in real life often. Daphne stays all summer and Henry arranges a coming out party, and it's not a Lizzo style about damn time type of coming out. It's actually the opposite of the LGBT style coming out. It sort of reflects the heteronormativity that often appears in films, where the coming out in this case of this party was as a woman of a certain social standing and eligibility would be announcing herself for male suitors. Well, the world has thankfully moved on a bit in the last 20 years. It has in some respects, it hasn't in others, as I've said. And this story reflects the Cinderella story. There's Clarissa, stepsister, there's snobbishness, there's a lot of spitefulness, there's a lot of press attention, very much like Harry and Meghan all over again. At least this was a little bit more light-hearted. One of the saviours was the Countess of Wickham, Jocelyn Dashwood, who realises how petty and awful the aristocratic ways are and helps Daphne a bit. There's also another character, Ian, played by Oliver James, who wins Daphne's affection but leaves her on the horns of the debutante's dilemma. Does she carry on trying to appease her father and try and get in his good books, or does she be herself and hook up with Ian? This is cheesy at times. It's got its predictable slapstick elements, but in other ways it was really sweet and entertaining. My favourite line was, "You won't get a scene, you'll get a Broadway musical." That's the films I've seen so far. If you've got any thoughts on any of them, let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye for now.